Welcome back to another episode of Adeptus Paternus. I have with me Joe, my teammate and local demon master, here to discuss the new Slanesh detachment that we got for Grotmas. How you doing, Joe?
Hey, I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You told me that you were actually a little excited about this one, more than most people.
Yeah, my initial read was not as optimistic because looking at the new Slanesh detachment or even just any of the new four, they're very different from the way that demons played. And my initial read was kind of that demons a little bit lost their identity, being known as kind of the uppy downy, very movement shenanigans related, very deep strike heavy kind of army, and most of the detachments lost some or all of that. So initially I wasn't super hot on any of them, but as I kind of read through and spent the morning thinking about, in particular, like the Slanesh one, but some of the other detachments as well, I really started to see kind of a different play style open up and really started to get excited about it. And then in the last just couple months, I've started kind of leaning heavy more into the Slanesh, Keeper's Secrets, kind of that sort of list, and that played very well into the Slanesh detachment. So
Mm-hmm.
I got pretty excited actually after kind of really sitting down and thinking about some of the new stratagems and the way to play. And I do think it is a very different army now
Mm-hmm.
in the way that it plays and not as much of a kind of movement shenanigans sort of army, but in my little bit of play testing yesterday and some of the other games, it actually feels really good. And so I'm excited to kind of test it out more and see, where it compares to the index detachment, because I still think the index detachment is really good. And I think it's still playable and tournament competitive, but I think a couple of these new detachments are at least on kind of the same level that the old detachment was on.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, I mean, good thing that you got this around the same time that you lost your 3-inch deep strike.
Yeah, I think that actually plays kind of into it too. So we just obviously got a kind of significant nerf with losing 3-inch deep strike. Obviously, everybody lost it, but demons really loved it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think demons were kind of one of the less egregious users of it because we weren't 3-inch deep striking to like just shoot you off the board. Demons often were using it to flip objectives or get secondary or get into your deployment zone. Obviously, very strong combos with like dropping Bellacore and Shalaxi or Scarbrand or Bloodthirster or something to go kill something, and that was pretty strong. But we weren't the army that was like dropping, 1,000 points of shooting and just shooting you off the board at 3 inches.
You mean like
Um,
me?
yeah, exactly. Right. So we're not dropping the croissant doom sights back in your backfield and just nuking half of your army in a single turn. Demons were using it more for objective play and kind of scoring and flipping objectives and stuff like that. So it hurt to lose it. It was still playable at 6 inches, but it also just kind of made that stratagem feel a little bit worthless.
Yeah, totally.
To when you already get 6-inch deep strikes across the board in shadows, spending a CP to do it, outside of shadow, sure, it's fine, but like it just kind of made the stratagem feel a little bit worthless. And so you lose that, and then right off the back of that, we got three new detachments that now are very much less centered around deep striking and less centered around needing to use that kind of movement shenanigans. Um, and so that kind of helped to, I guess, alleviate the loss of that, and that, now it doesn't feel like it's such a big loss when you have
Sure.
so many more options to do with your CP. And that's one of the things I found in the testing too, is like it feels so nice to have so much more CP now because you're not paying the uppy downy tax every turn and you're not paying the 3-inch deep strike tax. And you just have so much more CP to play with. Demons was always a CP heavy army. And it kind of forced you to go into tactical and just get those CP as much as you can. And very often I would spend games with one CP every single turn. And you always had to sit there and think about what you wanted to do with it. Am I going to use it to reroll my influence saves? Am I going to use it to uppy downy at the end of this turn? And so I think the secret little buff of all of these new detachments is that like it's a lot more freeing in what you use your CP with, and you just feel like you have a lot more.
Sure. And you have pretty obvious situations that you want to use particular,
Yeah, you don't
strats.
you don't have to think about it as much either. It's not like, oh, do I need to sticky this objective so I can go uppy downy at the end of the next turn and move off of this objective. It's pretty much just like use your strat when you need it. All right, I need to go through a wall. Perfect. Spend the CP, go through a wall, go fight something. Or I need to do a little bit of like more damage. So I'm in a tank shock or like the corn grenades or stuff like that. Um, you just you use the CP when you need to, and a lot of them are reactive too. So it's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, you shot me, and I want to keep something open. I'm gonna spend the CP to, you know, make your shooting harder, prevent that, make you battle shock in the Slanesh one,
Yep.
or like that one, that strat in particular, we'll talk about. I think
Yeah.
is really good.
We'll get there. We
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah,
give it away
yep,
too early.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, definitely.
but I do think that they'll probably fix that strat for the index of the 3-inch deep strike going to 6-inch deep strike. They'll make it something else. Otherwise, the
I hope
index is silly.
I hope so. I mean, it has limited use right now because you can only
Sure.
6-inch deep strike in shadow. Um, and so it gives you one unit per turn that you can do it outside of shadow. And I mean, it still has play, especially if you're going for secondaries like behind enemy lines or engage or something like that. It's still hard to screen out 6 inches all across the board. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, demons, I feel like just got it a little bit extra hard because the models that we like to deep strike 3 inches are like, greater demons with
Sure.
4.5-inch bases or like 10 plague bearers that are taking up a ton of space. So um, you're
Well,
not typically doing it with just a little guy.
yeah. I mean, try and 6-inch deep
Yeah.
strike a Tesseract Vault though, which is literally a square foot.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't even
Uh,
tried it yet. We'll see if I ever get to. But let's
yeah.
get started on
Sick.
the
Yeah.
Legion of Excess. You got a couple detachment rules. One is you can fall back and charge. Great, always nice.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
and I think this is probably the units that you would want to be doing this with, right?
yeah. The Slaanesh ones are great for it. And paired up with the other rule right below it, which we'll get to in a second, you pretty much have no incentive not to fall back and charge every single turn. The shooting in demons just pretty much all across the board outside of like a couple units is pretty bad anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
fall back shoot in charge would have been even better.
Sure.
But I can't ask for everything. Um, but yeah, fall back in charge on pretty much everything, and you're getting your fight first, or we'll talk about it in a
Yeah.
second, but
Well.
potentially some other buffs. Um, but
But
yeah, I mean, go ahead. We can talk about kind of the second part of
yeah.
that rule.
And it's generically good though, because I mean you might not even want to charge back right into the thing that you were fighting. You might decide, oh, actually, I want to go past you and charge something else.
Yeah,
Get onto an
especially
objective, whatever it may be.
especially because Slanesh is incredibly fast. I mean, most things moving 12 to 14 inches,
Sure.
the greater demons moving 14. Um, it also means, you can get caught up in combat and you can still fly across the board on
Mm-hmm.
your next turn and go fight something else or just get out of combat in general. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, still really good.
So let's get onto the more interesting and unique detachment rule. And I guess I should have said these are only Slanesh demons that get all of these rules, but I think it's obvious at this point. So the seductive gambit is every time a unit ends a charge move, you can declare that it will perform a seductive gambit. It loses the fight's first ability, but instead it gets to reroll hits and reroll wounds, which,
Yeah,
yeah,
full rerolls.
wow.
Um, Super strong. Uh,
Yeah.
just giving everything full rerolls. Um, the interesting part about this though is it has a lot of complexity in it. So on base read, you really, you get to choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is the nice part. You don't automatically have to give up fight first. You
Yes.
can still choose just to take it. But if you are sending something like a Keeper of Secrets into something that you know is just not going to hit you back, right? A tank, a transport, something like that, that's just terrible in melee. You go, all right, awesome, cool. Do your little bit of damage. I'm going to save everything on a 4 up invuln, and then 5 up feel no pain any damage that you get through. So you're not going to do anything back to me. And now I get full rerolls back against you. Um, so initially, it's just great for that. Anytime you're hitting something that's just not going to do anything in combat back to you, you get full rerolls on a Keeper of Secrets. That's great. It means you actually like pop transports now, where you know previously it was kind of a toss-up whether or not you do with the AP 3/3 damage, which is decent, but without full rerolls and
Yeah.
strength, I think 8 on the Keeper of Secrets, you're
Yeah.
not always reliably popping transports with it.
Yeah.
But full rerolls gives you it. But um, when you really kind of break this down, there's a ton of different um, combat tricks that you can do with this um, that completely negates the downside of not fighting first, um, and instead gives you just the full benefit of full rerolls. So a couple examples of that is like yesterday I was in a game and I double charged Shalaxi and a Keeper of Secrets into a tank, and I chose not to uh, fight with a Keeper of Secrets, let Shalaxi still fight first. Shalaxi absolutely just blew up the tank, did like 42 damage to it. It explodes. And now the Keeper of Secrets was, like about an inch and a half, 2 inches away from another unit. Um, and so Shalaxi activated, killed the thing, got the Keeper out of combat. And now you go to your opponent, they're 1.5 inches away and didn't charge that turn. So they don't get an activation, but the Keeper still does. So now you pile into the second unit, you go, all right, cool. I didn't get to fight first, but now I get my full rerolls into you now after I've piled into you. Um, and now I get, the benefit of full rerolls. Or um, another really good use of this is countercharging. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm ar I'm already not going to get the benefit of fighting first when I countercharge you, but the ability activates anytime that you make a charge move. So cool, I charge into you. I'm going to choose not to fight first, which I wouldn't have anyway. And then now I'm just going to get full rerolls against you. Um, or, you know, like alluding to one of the stratagems below, you basically get to like tank shock on anything now. So you can kind of do the same thing where you run into something like basically tank shock it or Slanesh tank shock, do some mortals, pop it, and then pile into a unit and get your full rerolls. So there's a lot of play into it because it just triggers every time that you make a charge move. Um, and so I think this is actually really good. I thought it was a little bit more limited when I first read it, being like, okay, well, I'm only going to use this against transports where they're not going to hit me, but there's actually a lot more that you can do with it and get those full rerolls.
Oh yeah.
That's really good. And then just quickly, the other time I think it really matters is with Shalaxi. So she, you might know, gets full rerolls to hit, wound, and damage against characters, monsters, and vehicles. So she, for the most part, doesn't need this ability. But there are times where you hit a unit that doesn't have a character in it, and it actually feels really bad to not reroll on Shalaxi, because she's kind of your brick powerhouse that you want to be killing anything that she touches. And if you're just hitting a random squad of like 5 Terminators that have no character leading them or something like that, and you have no rerolls, it kind of sucks and you lose that. But now this is another way to like make sure that Shalaxi gets full rerolls when she's fighting too. So you're never kind of in that situation where Shalaxi is kind of stuck fighting something that she doesn't want to be fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, I love this part of the detachment, and then coupled up with being able to retreat and charge and do it every single turn is just awesome. It feels really good, and it feels like the damage output of this Slanesh stuff kind of got bumped up. Um, and obviously Shalaxi was already the damage powerhouse of the game. Probably, I think, one of the best melee units in the entire,
Probably.
you know, game. Um, Hitting up there with like, you know, Angron and a couple other units that can do decent damage, but Shalaxi's just so consistent with all the rerolls too.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, just couple that up with your retreat and charges and, a couple other stratagems that you can pair this with, and it kind of just feels like Slaanesh is like the powerhouse for I'm gonna get into your face super fast in melee. We're gonna get stuck in. I'm gonna deal more damage than you, and then I'm gonna keep retreating and charging you every single turn. Um, and if you don't deal with my greater demons, you're just gonna get steamrolled by them.
And the way that a lot of people just kind of the strategies that people have for dealing with armies like this, for pressure melee armies, don't don't work when you can fall back and charge everywhere. For example, world eaters, if you just have enough screens to put in their way, like they're just never getting to the good stuff. I mean, you can even Angron who flies, it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna put a bunch of dudes anywhere that he could land that I don't want him to land,
Yeah,
and then you're stuck. Like, okay, you're gonna kill one thing, but like as long as you can't consolidate on, you're still just there, and then you have to like hope that you're close enough after you kill that the following turn you can try a charge. With this, you don't have to worry about that.
yeah,
I think that this is going to be really difficult for some people who have to deal with. I mean, it's very threatening.
yeah. I think so too. I think, yeah, I mean, interestingly, I think demons actually really have a good matchup into stuff like world eaters because just screen better than them, and then
Mm-hmm.
if you can pick the fight, like Shalaxi wins the fight versus Angron pretty easily.
Sure.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, just it's it's definitely still like a stat check army, because I still think it's very much greater demon focused. Um, but now, you're not trying to be as tricksy like you would with the index detachment where you're like teleporting them around and doing stuff with them. It literally is just run up and smash and repeat every single turn.
Sure. But
And I think
with
it's really good.
Yeah, but with this skill expression in the melee phase, that a charger melee phase
Yeah,
that you were mentioning, that like it doesn't. I mean, the best cases of these of the charging with 2 units and then activating Shalaxi for like that takes a little bit of planning,
yeah,
especially if you want to make it reliable. That you have to get your positioning right so that you're not hoping. Okay, well, I need 2 7-inch charges for this to work. You're probably gonna get one, but you may not get both, right?
yeah,
So yeah, I
exactly.
think that this isn't just a
No, it's not a Unga Bunga army
no.
necessarily.
There is some subtlety here, and
Yeah.
especially when we get to the rest of it, which yeah, we can get started on with the enhancements. Um, so the first one is False Majesty, which is an aura for 30 points. Uh, while a friendly Slaanesh unit, excluding monsters, is within 6 of the bearer, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, add 1 to the wound roll.
Uh, yeah, this one kind of pairs with the one below it, the
Okay,
Dreaming Crown, which does basically the same thing except it's +1 to hit for non-monsters.
cool.
So they're kind of a pair that you get here. I think they're really expensive for the
Sure.
buff that you get at 30 points. A lot of Slaanesh already has dev wounds too,
Mm-hmm.
um, and not particularly high strength anyway. So you're kind of just fishing for those sixes on the wounds. So I actually think the +1 to hit out of the two of these is a little bit stronger because most of the Slaanesh stuff hits on threes, and that drops you down to hitting on twos on stuff like Demonettes or Fiends, or Soul Grinders, which we'll talk about. Um, but to be honest, the two of these don't
Yeah.
particularly like hit super hard for me. Um, if you have 30 points, sure, they're not a bad enhancement. Um, I think probably though, if you have 30 points, the other two are just probably better.
Sure.
Um, but I mean, if you want to throw on one of the two of them, I think the +1 to hit is probably the better one to put on.
See, I actually think. Well, I'm not as familiar with the Slaanesh demons as you are, but if you're going from wounding on sixes to wounding on fives, you're doubling the wounds, and then if you're re-rolling, the +1 to wound actually becomes, much more efficient than the +1 to hit. The question is if you are reliably getting the demonettes into, and I'm assuming demonettes is where this would be appearing mostly, into the situation where you're going to be doing the seductive gambit, because you do want those reroll wounds in order to get the +1 to wound be valuable.
Yeah. Um, that's kind of the problem with Demonettes is like they're super squishy.
Mm-hmm.
They're T4, 1 wound apiece on a 5-up invuln.
Ooh,
So
yeah,
they're not the best target for the Gambit, unless you can be doing some sort of fight shenanigans where you're, piling into something after they don't get an activation. And kind of like I said, really the demonettes, oftentimes you're just fishing for the devs on
mm-hmm.
sixes for the damage. Um, so +1 to wound, and they're strength 4. They do get, 30 attacks at strength 4, which isn't nothing.
What's the
Um,
AP?
it AP 1,
Yeah,
AP 2 if they're standing next to a keeper of secrets, um, which is not terrible.
yeah. I mean, because
Um,
that's probably who would be taking this enhancement anyway.
Yeah, you're probably throwing it on a keeper, um, maybe uh, like a Demon Prince of Corn, are pretty decent actually. You can get a lot of attacks on them. Um, but yeah, I just feel like, you know, for the most part, it's kind of a lot of points invested into
Sure.
just a unit that you're is not your bread and butter, right? Like if this was +1 to wound on a keeper of secrets, you would take this every single time, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It would just be amazing. But it's non-monsters, so yeah, I just feel like there's not a lot in Slaanesh apart from demonettes and fiends that really are going to benefit from this. So yeah.
Okay. Well, then let's get on to what you think are the good ones. Avatar of Perfection for 15 points. So this one is specifically a monster only. If there are no other friendly units within 6 inches of the bearer, you can re-roll advance rolls, re-roll charge rolls, ignore modifiers to the move characteristic, and advance or charge rolls. So you go fast.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a 15-point enhancement that you throw on a Keeper of Secrets. Probably your second Keeper of Secrets gets this one. I think the below it is probably kind of the generic one that you would throw on something. But just being able to move, reliably, move, reroll your advances, reroll charges specifically is really
Yeah.
good. Ignore modifiers doesn't come up all too often, um, and especially since Slanesh already moves 14, you're not like hurting as much as some armies might if you're
Right.
-2 to move. Um, but yeah, I mean, the reroll charges specifically, is pretty good. Um, and again, if you have 15 points left over in your army, this isn't something like that's bad to take. Um,
I mean, I feel
I
like at least. Sorry to interrupt. I
yeah.
feel like it's worth it just because probably at least once a game it will save you a CP.
Yeah, you fail a charge, it's gonna happen, especially because you're, retreating and charging every turn. Um, so if you're not only retreating out an inch, you do have a chance to fail, and it always feels bad, especially when you're paying, 300 to 400 points for a model,
Yeah.
and it fails its charge, and now it's sitting there, uh, just doing nothing for an entire turn. That definitely feels bad. So yeah, if you have the points for it, what I really wish that this gave was advance and charge, and that's kind of one thing that's missing from this entire detachment is advance and charge. Um, and so that was one thing that we had kind of in the index detachment really easily. You could just spend a CP, on any greater demon basically, and give them advance and charge. Um, so that's
Yeah.
kind of the one part that this misses on for me is that, you don't advance in charge. It's just re-rolls. It's got a little bit of a hoop to jump through that you can't be within 6 inches of anything else. But like I said, I think if you have 15 points, or especially if you have like 2 Keeper of Secrets in your list, this goes on one of them, and it's fine.
Yeah. Let's get to the last one then. Soul Glutton for 10 points. Uh, Another monster one. At the end of the fight phase, if one or more models were destroyed by the bearer's attacks, it can use this enhancement. If it does, it regains D3 lost wounds for 10 points.
Yeah, I think for 10 points, this is kind of the winner of the
Yeah.
4 of them, especially at the points cost. It's pretty similar to the way that the old Slanesh index enhancement worked, which is it's different, and I think it's better and worse in some ways. The other one was every time you killed a model, you would roll a 3 plus and then heal a wound. Um, so if you're just chewing through like chaff, which Keeper of Secrets love to do, um, you could be healing a whole bunch of it. This one's a little bit more kind of reliable, where, just at the end of the fight phase, if you killed at least one thing, you heal D3, um, which, is, like I said, better in some situations, potentially kind of worse in some other ones. But for 10 points, you're not mad about taking this at all. And so, yeah, you just throw it on your Keeper of Secrets. I think this is the one you throw on first. And then, like I said, the Avatar of Perfection, if you have 2 Keeper of Secrets and you have 25 extra points, you throw the second one on the other one. And then there you go. You have 2 buffed keepers.
Yeah. I think that actually this uh, it synergizes actually a bit better with the Seductive Gambit than the Chaff one, because it's not infrequently the cases where you're going to want to where you're killing only one thing, would be the cases where most likely like a rhino or something that bumps you and maybe gets a wound or two in, and you're like, well, no worries, I'll just heal up again at the end after I get my rerolls and I kill it. So
Yeah, exactly.
definitely wouldn't
Um,
take it for more than 10 points, but for 10 points, I think it's pretty good. And it's always, I think it's also good for the mind tricks aspect of it, where not only have you killed something that your opponent wants, you have also healed up any damage that they did to you, and now they think, well, what the heck am I doing? I hate this game.
yeah. Um, I definitely I had a game like that yesterday, with in combination with one of the other stratagems that Slanesh now has. But I was just healing an insane amount on all of the greater demons every single turn. Um, and it's just, that's, I think, kind of the other strong part about Slanesh now, is just like you're healing so much, and keepers are already really hard to take down, with a permanent -1 to hit, 4 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain, and then
Mm-hmm.
just tons of healing across the board. Um, and importantly, this triggers every fight phase. And
Right.
so I'm doing it on my turn and your turn. And so that's D3, 2D3 every single battle round. And that's a lot of healing. So, yeah, I mean, at 10 points, I think this is a steal. I think it's almost at the point where you take this on your keeper every single time. Obviously, unless you don't have the points, but I think this is an easy, just throw it on a keeper. Um,
Yeah. I think it's
10
auto. I think
point.
it's auto include. I really
Yeah,
do, especially because of the potential for double. I mean, I'm obviously a Necron's main, and so I love healing. You're
yeah,
you're you're doing it almost better than I am. But
yeah. We'll talk about that too,
yeah,
with
when we
one
get
of these
there,
stratagems. It's crazy. But yeah, I think this is, yeah, pretty close to an auto include on your Keeper of Secrets every single time. And yeah, I could see it, you know, being good for a good long time. I think it's even good if it went up to like 15 points. I
sure,
wouldn't pay more
sure,
than that, but I
yeah,
think, you know,
yeah. I think the way that I think of auto include is if it's detachment defining. I don't think this is detachment defining. I just think it's a very nice to have cheap enhancement. So like you don't have to feel
yes,
bad if you can't take it, but if you can, you
yeah,
should.
exactly. Um, Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, it's definitely not something you play around. Not something that defines your strategy as demons at all. But yeah, it's just
It's
a good
gravy.
enhancement. Yeah, it's a super nice to
Yeah.
have. And double benefit that it is the cheapest enhancement out of all of them. So
All right, moving on to the stratagems. First one, Thieves of Pain. So this is any phase just after an attack or mortal wound is allocated to a model. The timing of that one is the good timing because you know if a mortal wound is going to be happening, as opposed to sometimes it's only if a mortal wound potentially could be happening.
yeah, you get to wait all the way up until that damage has been fully inflicted, the save's already been failed. Um,
Super nice. Very nice to
yeah,
have that knowledge because then you don't have to waste a CP.
yeah.
Um,
You can also like if you have a unit that needs to survive, you
well,
can kind of just let them. Oh,
we haven't even finished reading it. We just got
oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you're jumping the
Go
gun
ahead.
here. So it's
Yep, yep.
any model except for a monster. You select one other friendly unit within 12. Doesn't have to be visible, just within 12 until the end of the phase. While that other model or other unit is on the battlefield, each time a model in your unit would lose a wound, inflict a mortal wound on the selected unit instead. Which, holy cow!
Yeah. So you are basically just like transferring wounds over onto something else, which is really good. In my kind of initial read of this, I got crazy excited because I thought this meant that you could throw trash in front of like a greater demon or Shalaxi or a keeper of something and just take an extra 10 wounds on demonettes or something and keep Shalaxi safe.
Right, other
Um,
way
and,
around.
and it's the other way around, so Shalaxi can save wounds from your trash, um, or throw it onto a keeper. Um, but I still think it's really good if you need to save something. Like I had a game
Oh
yesterday where I had
yeah.
some fiends that were doing sabotage. And if they died from shooting, I'm gonna fail sabotage. But oh, okay, I can just shrug the wounds off to a keeper of secrets who gets a 5 up feel no pain and is
Mm-hmm.
probably gonna shrug off at least a couple of those, and then heal like we've talked about from everything else. Um, and now that unit is saved. Um, Importantly, one thing I think to note about this is that it says that it excludes monsters, um, but it does not exclude vehicles. And now demons aren't very well known for vehicles, but one unit that actually is pretty good right now is the Soul Grinders. And you can mark them as Slanesh, and they get all of the benefits of being a Slanesh keyworded unit. So you actually can shrug your wounds off away from your Soul Grinder onto your
Wow.
trash or onto a Keeper of Secrets. I think the Soul Grinders are really great right now because they get around a lot of the stuff. We'll see a couple times that says excluding monsters because they're vehicles. They don't care. So yeah, I think the Soul Grinders like particularly use this pretty well. Or obviously just saving your trash by shrugging the wounds off to a keeper.
And I
I don't
mean,
think that. Yeah,
yeah, no,
go ahead.
there's plenty of times where like, your sabotage is a good example. You're holding an objective because demonettes are battle line, right? And they have OC2.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden it's like, oh, you were going to contest that away from me. Well, no, you're not. And
yeah.
you can put it on something that's far away and unlikely to be killed by anything. That this is I think this is super good, especially with the healing options. I mean, it might even
Yeah.
come up where it's like, okay, well, I really want to get the reroll wounds on the demonettes so that I get extra dev wounds and just keep fishing for those sixes. So I'm gonna let you hit them first. I mean, especially if
Oh
it's
yeah.
something like you know. So the one interaction that I think would make this a little awkward is if it's uh more than damage one going onto the trash, right?
Mhm.
Because uh if it's damage 3, even though the damage doesn't spill over normally in 40k, technically for each damage 3, hit that a demonet took, if you wanted to move that over, that would be 3 mortal wounds. It wouldn't work in those circumstances as well. On the other hand,
Yeah.
though, on the other hand, though, from those soul grinders, you're shooting, d6 plus 1 damage at a soul grinder, and it's like, hey, demonette, take d6
Yep.
plus 1 damage.
Take 8. Yeah, take 8 damage.
Yeah,
Cool.
who
You killed one.
cares?
Yeah, no, I think in situations like that, like you said, obviously in some scenarios it's not great. In others, it's awesome, and you get so much value out of the extra trash that you're bringing. Um, I think one important thing to note about this, though, is it lasts for the entire phase.
Mm-hmm.
Um, once you have declared that you're going to use it, but also it's not a May. Um, so once you've declared that you're gonna start taking damage on a secondary unit,
Yeah,
it's gonna it's gonna continue taking all of the damage for the rest of that phase. And so I think you have to be really careful um, about when you use this. And kind of like I was saying, I think you're almost a little bit incentivized to like let some damage get through until you reach a certain threshold and this becomes something that you need to take. So I like this stratagem a lot. I think it's going to have a lot of play, um, but I think that you have to be careful in the way that you use it. And like
absolutely.
the keepers and Shalaxi, they do shrug. They take damage pretty well, but they're also expensive models.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't want to just be taking, 10, 12, 15 damage on a Keeper of Secrets for nothing. So um, I don't think it's an you always use this every time. I think it's a,
Wait,
if you really need to save something. Um,
I actually did. I misread this. It does say each time a model in your unit would lose a wound, you can't lose more wounds than you have.
oh, so it locks at 1.
It locks at 1 if you're using demonettes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
pretty good.
That is pretty good because.
So that's a way to just chunk down so much damage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not often are people going to be shooting, huge damage attacks into demonettes, but
But it's
like,
one less restriction.
yeah,
One
or
more.
if like an exocrine or something shoots into them,
Yeah.
that's 3 damage knocked down to a single damage. That's
Mm-hmm.
already, you know, dropping your damage potential by 66%. And then I'm gonna heal 30% of the, feel no pain 30% of those too,
And then heal.
uh, and then heal it off. So yeah, I didn't actually read that either, but that's really good.
That does make it better. I mean, there's a lot here that like it puts it in like yes, it's not for every situation, but it puts a good tool in your hand. So when you know when to use it, it is going to be very good. And it can be super frustrating for people. I mean, it's not quite uninteractable, but like if you know, for example, that somebody can only put 2 activations into something, maybe yeah, you know that those 2 activations can't possibly. Well, here's the thing: if it's 10 demonettes, and I mean, how many wounds does the Keeper of Secrets have?
Keepers are 18, Shalaxi's 20.
Right. So if you have 10 demonettes, and you're like, no, I really want to keep those demonettes alive, I'm going to shrug it off to the keeper. Under no circumstances can they, assuming that they can't subsequently shoot the keeper. If the keeper is behind a wall somewhere and they can't see it, there's no way that the keeper can die. Those demonettes, are like. Wait, no,
Yeah,
I got this quite a little bit wrong. But the point is, if you know that it will work, it's great. And the other thing is you can always warn people like, hey, I might do this, and then they have to think about it. Maybe they are going to put more activations into something, or like stage more stuff in case they have to put more shooting into something.
yeah,
This is a very good strat.
yeah.
Um,
And like you said, one of the best parts about this is you trigger it at any point when the wound is allocated. And
Yep.
so you can kind of wait to see how things are playing out or how many like saves you make,
Mm-hmm.
um, and see. So this doesn't have to be a reaction to them getting shot. This doesn't have to be, anything like that. It's like, oh, okay, cool. I'm gonna take this damage. Actually, instead, I'm just gonna shrug it off.
Yep.
So yeah, I think this one's super good.
Yep. All right. Arc agonists. A little bit of pun there. For 2 CP, which is a lot, but
Yeah.
fight phase, this can be a monster unit or 2 non monsters. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to the wound roll. I mean,
Yeah. Um, I mean, obviously, +1 to wound is good. Um, but at 2 CP, I very rarely see this getting used, probably.
not if you
Um,
can. Not if you can. I mean, okay. If it's something like, you're going into the Silent King and you really need him dead and you have the CP for it, it's your go turn. Like Shalaxi just needs to kill him because unbuffed Shalaxi probably doesn't kill him,
yeah.
especially if the Necrons player paid a CP to make him -1 to wound.
Mhm.
Although having to
Yeah.
trade 2 CP for 1 CP doesn't feel great.
Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think
But 2 Soul
it's
Grinders,
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Two soul grinders, right? Not monsters. And soul grinders slap pretty hard in combat.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that makes this not a great stratagem is the CP cost.
sure.
If this was 1 CP, this would be awesome. You'd probably use it every single turn.
Yes.
Um, but at 2 CP, it's kind of one of those things that you might use once in a game when you really need to pop something,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the CP available to do it. Um,
Yeah.
so
It's
it's not
it's
it's not bad by any means. I just think
no,
it's expensive.
it's a nice to have. I mean, it is nice that there are like no restrictions aside from
Yeah,
you know
no, it's just
just
just spend the CP, get +1 to wound,
yep,
end of story, period.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean it's decent.
yeah.
And it's nice that this isn't actually, like they added in the caveat that you can use this on monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, if you want to.
so yeah,
Yeah,
I mean it's fine. I think it's probably the most simple of all of the stratagems
sure.
inside of here. Um, I think it's weird that this is the one that they chose to make 2 CP.
Uh huh.
Um, I feel
Well,
like
+1 to
some of
wound
the
is super is very
yeah,
powerful.
yeah, it's good. Uh, so I kind of understand it in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, just it's an interesting one. It's not one that I'm like super hot on. And like I said, it'll probably come up once in a game, if that.
My question is not why is this 2 CP so much as why is the Star Shatter Necron's reactive move not 2 CP?
Yeah.
That should be 2 CP. And it
Yeah.
probably will be eventually.
Mhm.
All right, next is sensory excruciation. In your command phase, a monster, each unit on the battlefield that is within your army's Shadow of Chaos must take a battle shock test, subtracting 1 from that test if they are below half strength.
Yep. Um, so I actually think that this is the strongest stratagem that Slaanesh has.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's because of the insane healing potential that you get from this every single turn. So as a base, Greater Demons already have a 6-up leadership, um, which is really good. And then when you're in your army's Shadow of Chaos, you get +1 to battle shock tests, and all Greater Demons are already in their own shadows. And so now that turns that 6-up into a 5-up. Um, and so what you can do with this, which is just insane, is okay, I'm going to charge everything in my army into you. We're going to do our fights for a turn. And I had a game yesterday where my opponent got three greater demons, Shalaxi, the keeper, both of my keepers down below half strength. And so at the start of your turn, you roll your battle shock test, like just your regular one,
Mm-hmm.
and odds are you pass that, you heal D3 wounds. And then you pop this, and odds are you pass that and you heal D3 wounds. And so you're healing 2 D3 every single uh, of your command phases on top of everything else, and it's just so oppressive.
And if you're
Um,
in combat with them, then they have to take a battle
yep,
shock test too.
yeah, if you're within 6 inches of them, now they take a battle shock test. And even stuff that, Space Marines with relatively good leadership tests, if I'm forcing you to take like 5 to 10 battle shock tests every single turn, you're gonna fail some of them, and it's gonna matter sometimes. And then on top of that, it actually is a true battle shock test, finally, which now triggers, the Demon's Army rule, where not only are you going to be battle shocked, but you're also taking D3 wounds on everything that fails. So I'm sitting over here healing 2 D3 every single command phase. You have to battle shock in my command phase and take D3 wounds. This can also like flip objectives over
Yep.
onto you because this is happening before objective control is determined.
Well, after
So
object, so it actually um it uh, happens at the end of the phase when objective control is determined. So it can't technically flip an objective. So you don't if you don't control it at the beginning of the phase, it will go to you at the end of the phase if they're battle shocked, but scoring will already have happened. So it can't quite do that, unfortunately.
I think I'll have to look into it
We'll have
more,
to
but I
look it
think
up and we'll leave a
objective
comment.
control, yeah,
I know
I
for a
think
fact
objective
the objective
control is,
control is measured at the start and end of every phase. The question is if they say that scoring is counted at the end of the phase or if it's its own part of the command phase. Because if it's simultaneously, then you can pick. If it's not
yeah,
simultaneous, so we'll have to look into that. I'll leave a comment once we've determined what the correct answer is.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, you get all of that benefit for the trade-off of maybe sometimes battle shocking your own units.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that
but
actually this should have been 2 CP and the other one.
that's I agree, and I hope that they don't switch it because I love this so much. Um, but yeah, I agree. I think this is the one that probably should have been 2 CP. Because I mean, it's just basically the Tyranids army rule on the your turn every single turn. Except for probably turn one. Um, but yeah, I mean it's just so good to be able to do this. It's technically actually a little bit restricted. You have to have a Slanesh monster on the
Oh yeah,
battlefield
so if they're all
in order
dead,
to do this. Yeah,
yeah.
so your Shalaxi, Keeper of Secrets, they have to actually be alive for you to be able to use this. Um, you also, you do subtract one from the test if you're below half strength, so that might hurt you a tiny bit. Um,
Well, if you
in
passed the first time,
Yeah,
that
the
might have
hope is that
gotten
you
you to
you
above.
pass the first time, and then you get above, and then this, is just take a battle shock test regardless of your current, you know, below half strength status, and so you could get above that. And actually, for the first time in like the last year and a half, I finally used Bellacor's +1 to battle shock aura instead of his 18-inch can't shoot me aura. Um, to give the greater demons just an even better chance of passing. Because now, if they're not below half strength when they take this, they're passing on a 4 up
Yeah, that's
on 2 dice. So,
that's very very likely. I
yeah. So, for the first time ever in like almost 2 years, I used Bellacor's +1 leadership aura instead of his 18-inch
that
blown up
that
one.
is very funny. I also find it funny that they put a designer's note here to specifically tell you like no, it's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing to make your own things battle shock.
Yeah. Yeah, the designer notes on these are actually kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, they specifically say like, well, just be careful. You can fail this, but odds are the demons are probably going to heal.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and then uh, one of the other things that kind of goes along with this that we haven't touched on quite yet, but demons when they take battle shock, most things are just going to heal D3 wounds.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a battle line unit, they actually return D3 models back. And so your demonettes could be returning D3 models back. Um,
That's
or
good.
plague bearers or nurglings are returning D3 models back instead of D3 wounds. Um,
That's good. That is
yeah,
really good. I mean, like, yeah, that's super
yeah,
good. I mean, I could see a situation where Shalaxi has, I don't know, 3 wounds left, and you fail a save. You fail your last save for, like, I don't know, 3 damage, and you're like, you know what? I don't even want to risk failing my, like, feel no pains and her dying. I'm gonna now use the strat to shuffle it over to some demonettes, and then the demonettes just come back.
yeah. I wish. Remember, you can't shrug wounds away from
Oh,
Shalaxi.
that's right. Darn.
Yeah,
Darn.
but
Well, let's say it's a
um,
soul grinder. I don't know.
yeah, exactly. But same concept, right?
You
Where
you
you just
sacrifice some demonettes and you get them back. It's fine.
you get him back, and then like I said again too, you can basically do that twice, because you have your regular battle shock activation, and then you have this, and so now
Oh
it's
man,
two D3 demonettes coming back every single turn.
Your
Uh,
Necrons zing better than Necrons.
yeah, it's pretty sweet. I think this is the strongest actually of the stratagems by far.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's. I mean, yes, there is a risk to it, which is appropriate for something that is otherwise very strong. But it is.
yeah,
It seems very strong.
yeah, it's super good.
Yeah,
So I love this. I think you actually use this probably every single turn.
except for turn
Um,
one,
except for turn one, unless
and
for
probably you don't
some,
need to turn 5, but
yeah,
maybe you do.
yeah. I mean, potentially, if you need to heal some wounds, or depending on what we figure out, if you need to like flip an objective or
Yeah.
something, you may be doing on 5.
I mean, the one thing
Um,
that is less, it's not quite the Tyranids, shadow, is that you can't do it in their command phase. If you could do it in
yeah,
their command phase, whew,
it'd be so,
that would
it'd be
be
too good.
that would be
Yeah.
way too good. But all right,
Um,
next one, Phantasmal Longing, 1 CP, 1 unit can go through terrain features.
yeah,
Um,
this one's just good.
yeah,
Um,
it's
this is kind of the replacement for demons losing uppy downy and teleport strats,
yeah,
is that all of the detachments now got a 1 CP move through a wall strat.
yeah.
um, and it's just good. um,
It doesn't say that
Especially,
you can move through units though, which is like some of the other ones that we've seen in other detachments where you can go through walls and units. You can't unless you have fly, in which case obviously you can.
yeah. So yeah, you're still a little bit limited in that if people stage up on the other side of a wall from you or something like that. um, but you know
It's
it
it's
just
a useful thing to
it
have.
it's great to have. Typically, like turn one, you stage Shalaxi or a Keeper of Secrets completely behind a wall, and previously they were going to have to use 6-8 inches of movement to go around that. Um,
It's a
and now
big
it's
movement
like,
buff.
boop, boop, pop, I'm moving 14 inches straight at you. Um, so yeah, it's really good. I think, you're probably using this, close to every turn. Some turns you're obviously not going to need it, but you're at least using this every game. Um,
Yeah, I don't think you're using it. I think you can plan around your positioning enough that you don't have to use this every turn. You might even go some games where you don't need it at all. But I also think it's worth pointing out that you can do this on a fallback move. So you can fall back through a wall,
yeah, you
which
can,
could be
yeah, you can
very
fall back
handy
super
if
far.
like you're pinned up against a wall and that way you don't have to take a desperate escape test.
Yeah. Um, which is really good.
Yeah, yeah,
Especially because you're gonna be fallback and charging every single turn, so you can pair this up with that, and you can threaten objectives. You can threaten units that your opponent didn't think you had any possible way of getting to on that turn. Um, so
yep,
yeah, I think it has a lot of play, and you know, it's just a good strat. And for one CP, it's a good cost.
yep.
And yeah,
It's funny to me how at the beginning of 10th edition the change to fly made it so that you can't just go like draw straight lines through buildings. You have to you know go up and
yeah,
over, and everyone's like, oh my god, terrain is so interactive now. And now everybody's getting a go through Kool-Aid through a wall strat. So
yeah,
but at least it's a strat and not like an ability. I mean, obviously the knights have the ability, but that's a bit different.
yeah,
All right, Cavalcade of Blades. It's funny. They could have, they had arc agonists. They could have had like caval blades, but maybe that one's not as obvious a pun. Anyway, your charge phase, any Slanesh unit that charged, impact mortals. Roll 1d6 for each model that is within engagement range, or 66 if it's a monster. For each 4 up, 1 mortal wound.
yeah.
Super handy.
Um,
Tank
yeah,
mini tank shock.
yeah. Mini tank shock. So yeah, this what I was saying. Demons basically got tank shock now, which is really nice. Like everything in our army is a monster, and previously tank shock was just a stratagem that we don't get to use at all. So it's nice to be able to have kind of our own little version of it. Um, it's it's decent, right? So on a greater demon, 6 dice and a 4 up, you're averaging 3 mortal wounds. I think it's really funny that you can do something or do this on something like Demonettes too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tank shock you with my Demonettes. And actually, if you get every model into engagement range, that's 10d6,
Yep.
averaging 5 damage. And then you're coupling that up with their dev wounds from their attacks on top of that. Um, and so you can actually pump out a good little bit of damage from this. Um, like I was saying kind of at the beginning too, you can, maybe even pair this up where I'm going to charge something that's only on like a couple wounds. I'm going to tank shock it and kill it with the mortals, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to forego my fight first and then pile into a different unit with full rerolls now. Um, so I think this one's pretty good as well. Um, I don't think it's, an auto use by any means. 3 to 5 damage is awesome, but won't always turn the tide of a fight. But
Sure, but I mean,
yeah,
it's the same considerations as any tank shock.
yeah, exactly.
Um, and
So it's
actually, I
just
was
super nice to have.
I was thinking about it because tank shop is on a 5 up and this is on a 4 up. It actually ends up, if let's say it's you're tank shocking with a T10 vehicle, it ends up being the same average number, right? I mean, 33% of 10 is 3, and half of 6 is 3. You
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
and
Um,
both are capped at 6. You're a little bit more likely to get, I guess, 6 on the big tank shock, but not
yeah,
necessarily. I feel like rolling 6 out of 10 5 ups. I don't know. I'd have to do the math. It's good. It's a it's nice that you
yeah.
have access to it. I mean, you don't have anything that procs off of something being below starting strength, do you?
No.
Yeah, that's
Um,
when it becomes really nice. Like, if you're +1 to hit if something is below starting strength, and then you can grenade it or tank shock it so that you can proc that. That's nice. But
yeah,
even if it's not, I think then you can actually even do your strategy of like, I don't, if there's a rhino on 1 wound left, you're almost guaranteed, not actually guaranteed, but almost guaranteed to. I mean, you have a very good chance that you're going to roll at least 1 6, kill it, and then you can forego you can do the beguiling thing and then pile into something else. So
yeah,
there's
exactly.
definitely play here. I mean, you're gonna want to do a lot of these strats though, so yeah, you're still gonna have to be keeping 1 CP in the pocket just in case.
Yeah. Um,
And then
exactly.
yeah, uh,
Yeah. And then the last one, um,
overwhelming excess. Your opponent's shooting. This is the funny one.
Yeah, I think this is probably the second strongest out of all of them.
Yeah, it's actually nice that there's not a range limit on this. Deathwatch has an enhancement that does exactly this, but there's a range limitation. Anyway, but let's get into it. The attacking unit must take a battle shock test, subtracting 1 from the result. If the test is passed, each time a model in the attacking unit makes an attack that targets your unit, subtract 1 from the hit roll. If the test is failed, in addition to being battle shocked, until the end of the phase, the attacking unit cannot select your unit as the target of any attacks, but you can shoot at something else. So,
Yep.
yeah.
This this one's awesome. You point at me with your big las cannons, which demons don't love.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're just gonna take a huge number of shots from whatever, um, you just point at them and you say, okay, take a battle shock test, and even if you pass, you're gonna be -1 to hit. And if you fail, you're just not shooting Shalaxi with
Yeah.
that this turn. Turnover, now you can go shoot my fiends or, my nerdlings or something else. Like your entire activation with that unit is just wasted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so this one is awesome. Like I said, I think it's the second strongest probably out of all of the stratagems. Just because a lot of times what happens with greater demons is they're just a big target for people to focus down. Um, and so,
Yeah.
you know, people are going to shoot as much as they can into one, and then they're going to try to charge and kill it. And if you can take out, basically one of their strongest kind of shooting units, um, just by activating the strat, and now it has to redirect its shots into something it didn't want to shoot, um, then you've really thrown a wrench into their plan,
Yeah.
and you've kept your greater demon from losing 10 health, um, and that can be the difference between keeping a keeper of secrets alive and not. And so, like,
Mm-hmm.
again, this is what happened in one of my games yesterday, and he thought he was going to get a whole bunch of damage off on the keeper, and I popped this, and he failed, and now can't shoot the keeper, had no other targets in range, had to try to do it all in combat, and failed, and only got it down to, like, I don't know, 9 wounds left, and that's when I double procced the battle shock, and then the command phase force everything to battle shock. I healed up 2d6, and then it's just like, okay, everything that you just did is gone. Um, so
That's
it's
backbreaking.
yeah, it was so good. And then I love that you know, there's no real penalty to using this.
Just
Because
you
even if
spent
they
a CP opportunity cost.
Yeah. And even if but even if they pass their battle shock test, they're still going to be at -1 to hit.
Yeah.
Um, so
I mean, assuming they're not like there's lots of stuff out there that can ignore modifiers to the hit roll, but assuming that they're not, if it's something like orcs, gosh, like they hate being -1 to hit if you're an orcs unit is essentially like not being able to shoot because you're
yeah,
going from hitting on 5s to 6s.
yep.
Um, I,
Um,
yeah, I think I don't think you're going to use it all the time, but I think it is a nice last bit in there to kind of keep things alive, especially if they do pass and you have a CP, you could still potentially, depending on what is getting shot at, if it's not a big unit. I mean, but it also does mean that you could, against an army that maybe doesn't have particularly good leadership, put, say, some demonettes on an objective, and that's the only thing that they can see. Maybe it's like turn 2, and you don't have too much else that's out there. You just had to put some demonettes on an objective to, like, cleanse or something, and you'd really like to hold that point without necessarily passing wounds off. Or maybe, who knows? You could do this and pray. I don't know. I think in practice, it is unreliable enough that it's not the most. Like I think that the shrugging the moving wounds over is actually a better one than this one, just because you know you're in complete control. There's no random number generation on that. With this one, um, like if they're hitting on twos, shooting at you, and they have a good leadership, if the Silent King, for example, is shooting at you and he's like saving on fours, I think fives, I don't remember. Doesn't come up
Yeah.
very often. Um, it probably isn't stopping him from shooting at you, and he doesn't even care about being -1 to hit that much.
Yeah.
So, but
Um,
that's that's the way it is. It is good. It is good. It's just I think it's not like the excruciation one, where you're planning your game around that. You're just that's how it's going. And I also realized if you really needed to do, like you do the sensory excruciation and you let's say you pass your first one, and then you're like you have one demon that is like on a point, and you're like I cannot fail this one. You can insane bravery it. It's in your command phase. And insane bravery is allowed to be used in your command phase at any point that you're about to take a battle shock test, including after excruciation. So that's kind of
mhm.
cool. Like if you have the CP and you really need to make sure that you're not losing 5 victory points, do that.
Yep. Yeah. You just auto pass it.
Yep.
Um, or, like before, like I said, if you need to get above that wound threshold too,
Yeah, you could auto
not
pass
be
the
minus
first one.
one, you can auto pass the first one and then do this on the second one.
Yep.
Uh,
I have a question about Bellicor. Do you pick his aura in your command phase or at the beginning of the battle round?
I believe Bellicor is the battle round.
So yeah, so if you're going first, it's not as big a deal. You can kind of be like, okay, I'm gonna need that extra leadership just in case. But if you're going second, you might not want to you know bank on that
Yeah,
because you don't know what's gonna happen in your opponent's turn.
yeah. So for Bellicor specifically, I think it actually favors going first a little bit,
Absolutely,
um, because
absolutely.
you get to choose what you want. But actually, kind of just in general now, I feel like demons may be switching over a little bit more. Obviously, depending on the match and the matchup, and the mission. But demons don't hate going first as much as they previously did.
Oh no, this
Previously,
is yeah. You
yeah,
want to go
previously
first.
you kind of always wanted to go second for uppy
Mm-hmm.
downies and for objective play and all of that. Um, but it's not nearly as much as it feels bad now if you're going second. Especially like one of the kind of strats that I think demons do pretty well with stuff like fiends is being able to like move block certain movement lanes and channels, just because you move so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So going first actually doesn't feel bad anymore. So um, yeah, doing that and then obviously like having Bellacore and being able to choose when you or choose the buff you need when you need it,
Yeah.
definitely helps.
I don't even think that you hate going second because you're fast enough that you can still stage the way you want to most of the time, and you can still go through a wall and stage if you really need to. I think that it's the fact that you have like these are good rules, and then you also have units that are like worth buffing with enough various play. This seems to me to be very like solid as a melee option, and I think it does melee in a different way. It applies the pressure in a different way from most other melee armies. It's not world eaters of just like you have a small number of things that like are actually kind of fragile and just really want
Hmm.
to hit you first. You have staying power, and it's also not like the Black Templars of yore of just chew through this. If you can chew fast enough, you win. If you can't chew fast enough, you lose. Um,
Yeah,
there's good stuff in here.
yeah.
I mean, I think it will. It definitely is a really good counter to other monster mashes.
Hmm.
it might have a harder time with more MSU things because like if you're taking you're probably not taking that many demonettes. I mean, how many were you running?
Right now, just one block of 10. Um, so one block there. The keepers actually do a really decent job of clearing kind of trash like that, with 10 attacks at AP 3, 3 damage,
Yeah.
and their shooting being, particularly designed at chaff too. Um, so, some armies will be able to outflood you, and kind of one of the problems with demons has always been just their 5 OC, and if you can put 3 Termagants on an objective, you out OC me. Um,
Yep.
um, but yeah, I mean they deal with chaff like reasonably well. The armies that I think this will actually kind of struggle more into are really high toughness, so like knights, where I can kind of reliably kill a knight a turn, um, but you're gonna have other stuff coming into me, or like, particularly like a lancer,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the new detachment where the lancer can fall back, shoot, charge, and then tank shock for free every single turn. Um, that those kind of armies it's going to struggle with, and then demons have always just been an army that kind of struggles against really heavy shooting.
Yeah.
So like Tau or T Suns who just do all dev wounds, and just bypass all the 4-up invuln saves. So those are the armies that we're going to struggle with, but that's kind of typically always been true. I think, now again, it's a very different way to play the army where you're not worrying too much about, deep striking around and uppy downies or kind of where I need to position my models anymore. It's more so just like, where do I need to fight? What fights are the most important? How do I hinder my opponent from scoring as much as possible by using my greater demons? Um, and yeah,
Yeah. It seems fun. It seems strong. It seems like a even better teams detachment than the index one. I think that you have some matchups which you absolutely wreck, and that you can actually run up the score. Whereas I think the index you weren't. Yeah, you might win, but you weren't getting like
yeah,
18 twos.
no,
Whereas
it
this, you
usually wasn't.
totally could. You
Yeah,
totally can just wrecking ball into some armies. Like, yeah,
yeah. I went into what Dark Angels yesterday playing this and scored 100 to 22.
right,
Like tabled him by turn 3,
yeah,
and then just racked up the score for the rest of the game.
yep,
So yeah, I think this is a really good team's army. Um, when we get to it at another day, I think the corn one is pretty good for teams too. Um, but yeah, the I think this detachment in general probably has kind of the most tournament level competitive level viability.
mm-hmm,
Um, and I think, ultimately it's a question of, does this beat out the index detachment for tournament viability? And I think the Slanesh one, um, at least, you know, competes with it. And we'll just have to see how the meta shakes up and how people are running these lists to see how well it actually does at big tournaments. But just on initial reads and some from some playtesting, I think that the Slanesh one is probably the most tournament viable out of all of them, and might even beat out the index detachment for
yeah.
tournaments.
I mean, definitely index as it currently exists without that strat fix. If they put in something good there, then maybe it comes back. But I think that it's kind of
Yeah,
you have lost your one of your biggest tools without having been compensated in any particular way, and not having been like wrecking the meta and in need of a nerf. So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, demons were doing fine, right? At like a
mm-hmm.
51 to 53% win rate. So I can't really complain about where we were at, but yeah, we just got a big nerf, and um, we were gonna have to see how things went. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, this one from from my games so far has been super fun to play, which I think is important too. But I think just I think it's also pretty competitive, pretty viable. Um, and ultimately, just if you're down to run, pretty much mono Slanesh, um, and just get in there, then this is an awesome detachment. One thing, I'll note too that we haven't talked about, and that's really nice with all of these detachments, is that you're not barred from taking non-Slanesh units
Right.
in your list. And that was one thing I was worried about initially was that they were going to say that every single unit inside of your army had to be Slanesh to get this benefit. But you can still take non-Slanesh units and still have them be utility for you. I think every Demon's list is still going to run probably 10 Plague Bearers and a non-zero amount of like Nurglings. Just for infiltrate and to block scouts and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously like Bellacore, has been kind of a hot topic, very wishy-washy with a lot of people about whether or not you run Bellacore or not. And we'll just have to see with these mono detachments too if people continue to run him. Um, but yeah, I mean you can still take those units, you just don't get, you know, any of the benefits, you don't get any of the stratagems and obviously like no enhancements on them, but
Right.
you can still take all the extra stuff that you were still running and still have the utility from them. You're not locked
Some
from taking those in your list.
some data sheets are just good without buffs.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah. Plague Bears, Nurglings, probably going to go in every list forever.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
Well, thanks. This has been very enlightening. I am actually looking forward to playing against this on Sunday.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think it's going to do too well against the planes because
We'll see.
Keepers, Relaxy, they don't fly. Going to be tough. We'll see if Bellacore can do it by himself. Um, but but yeah, it'll be a fun game for sure.
All right. Well, we'll report back on that. Anyway, thanks
All right,
again. And if you're still here listening, please like, comment, subscribe. Tell us what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. Appreciate it.
awesome.
All right,
Yeah, peace out, guys.
see ya.